This week's shiur is Lili Nishmat Avi Marido Ber Meir Ben Reuven Halevi Imi Marati Rachel Bat Harav Michael. This week we're talking about parshat Mishpatim, and while the whole parshat Mishpatim talks about all sorts of different laws, we're going to focus on the last parak, the last two chapters in the Torah, the last aliyah of Mishpatim, which talks about what happened surrounding either before or after the giving of the Torah, of Hashem talking to all of Am Yisrael at Har Sinai. And this event is very, very significant. And we, of course, read about part of it in Parshat Yitro, part of it in Parshat Mishpatim. Yet the Torah itself, Moshe, when he is reviewing 40 years later all of these events, he gives us the following very, very important passage. And this is from Devarim Parak Daled, where Moshe says, "Raki shavar lecho shmor nafshecha miod pentishkach et advarim asher ra'u einecha v'yasum levavcha kol yimei chayecha v'datam libnecha u'bnei banecha." You have to be very, very careful. Shmor hishavar lecho shmor nafshecha miod. Double language here. Pentishkach et advarim, lest you forget the things that your eyes saw, and lest you remove from your heart all the days of your life. And you have to, in other words, you shouldn't let this happen. And also you have an obligation to teach your sons and grandchildren, very, very similar to the mitzvah we have of the Haggadah, of relating and retelling the story of the Exodus. And what is that? The day that you all stood sing as a nation in front of Hashem at Har Chorev. When Hashem told me, when Hashem told me to gather the people together, and I will relate to them all of my words, in order that they should come to fear me. And this is one of the sheishes he wrote, one of the 6 things that we have to remember every day, the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai, because it is the unique experience of the Jewish people that sets us aside from every other people and every other religion. Most religions are based on a single person coming and saying, "Oh, God came to me and he revealed wonderful things to me." But here, Hashem spoke to all of Am Yisrael, and we see Moshe again reminding them exactly what that was, what happened, because he says later on in that same parak, "Ki shall know Yamim Rishonim," when you'll ask about history, all the days that were before you in history, from the day that Hashem created Adam ala Aretz, from one end of the universe to the other. Has anybody ever witnessed such a magnificent thing or heard about such a magnificent thing? Anybody else made a claim that God spoke to the whole nation? Has any other nation even claimed to hear the voice of God speaking from the fire, as you heard, and survive to tell about it? So this concept of Ma'amad Har Sinai, in addition to what Hashem told us, that's very important also, not to minimize that, but remembering this awesome day of revelation is in and of itself a very, very significant and important part of our day-to-day. We have to always be cognizant of the fact that we are different because Hashem told us that. Not some prophet who had a dream, but Hashem himself came down and told us this. Okay, having said all that, as the intro, basically, we're now going to begin by looking at the 2 different ways the Torah describes the events surrounding the giving of the Torah. We're not going to talk about the Aseret Dibrot, even though, yes, they're very important. We're going to focus on the events surrounding it as they are described in the Torah. So firstly, we'll go back to last week's parsha, in Parshat Yitro, where we begin with the Bnei Yisrael's arrival at Har Sinai. On the 3rd month of the time Bnei Yisrael arrived, left Egypt, they arrived at Har Sinai, and they traveled from Refidim to come to Har Sinai. And interestingly, all the Parshanim look at Vayachanu Bamidbar, even though they camped in the Midbar. And normally, when Jews camp throughout the 40 years, it used the word Vayachanu, the plural. Here it uses the word singularly, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Har, that the Jews encamped singularly opposite the mountain. And Rashi's B'lei V'chad, Kishachad B'lei V'chad, that they came with one heart. They were united in their arrival at Har Sinai, like they were never united before or after throughout their travels in the desert. They knew they had arrived at the place where Hashem was going to speak to them, and as such, they had this great feeling of unity of purpose, of unity as a nation, which is what we are striving for every day. And yet, as a people, we have yet to get there, other than this one unique time in history. Okay, having said that, we're going to continue on the Shemot side. And again, the Torah there describes almost Moshe being a messenger between God and the people going up and down the mountain. Moshe Allah Elohim first goes up to God. Hashem Hashem calls Moshe from the mountain and says, gives him this message. You have to tell Bnei Yisrael, you have to tell the men, the women, and basically he's repeating, you've seen what happened in Egypt. Now, if you listen to my voice, you will be Temli Sigula, we will be Hashem's treasure among all the nations. Not that we are better, not that we are different, because we have a different role in history to play. Hashem has given us what, and we look in Pasuk Vav, Atem Tihu Li, our role is to be Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. Now, if we think about the role of a Kohen, which we generally translate as priest, the Kohen were those who officiated in the Beit Hamikdash. A Kohen is somebody whose job it is to help everybody come closer to Hashem, i.e., he is supposed to be closer to Hashem. He is supposed to be able to raise other people to Hashem. We are to be, all of us, a Mamlechet Kohanim. How are we to do that? By being a Goy Kadosh, a holy, separated people. Remembering that the word Kadosh, which we usually translate as holy, also has its root in Hebrew as something that is set aside for a specific purpose. The Jewish people are set aside for a specific purpose of teaching the world about God. That is our role. And Hashem tells Moshe, this is what you have to share with Bnei Yisrael. We're about to go through this awesome experience. Before we go through it, they have to know what is the purpose of this experience, that they are going to accept my sovereignty, accept their unique role in my world, and then we can move forward. Okay, Moshe comes, calls the elders, and tells them all that Hashem had commanded. And it's not just the elders answer. If we look here in verse Chet, it says they all answer, Kol der asher diber Hashem na'aseh. Now, we all know that there's a famous passage called Na'aseh v'nishma. But according to this, it's not here in Parshat Yitro. It's only in Parshat Mishpatim later on where we will see this phrase Na'aseh v'nishma. Here, all they do is they say, Kol asher diber Hashem na'aseh. Whatever Hashem says, we will do. So they are ready to accept Hashem's covenant. The Nishma part we'll talk about a little bit later, Hashem, but this is Na'aseh. We accept to do whatever Hashem tells us. And Moshe, now if we go again here, Vayashev Moshe et Divrei Ha'am El Hashem, Moshe tells the people what Hashem, exactly what Hashem wants, and we go forward. Hashem now tells Moshe, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to come, there'll be a cloud. Hashem's revelation at Har Sinai has two purposes. One is Yishma Medabri. People will hear me talking to you, but talking to them. But also you, Moshe, will be validated. In other words, the prophecy of Moshe, how do we know that Moshe is a true prophet? Because he said Hashem spoke to him? No, because we all heard Hashem speaking to him. That is Moshe's validation. One of the things that happens in Har Sinai, in addition to us all hearing Hashem individually, we all hear that Moshe is the one who is selected as the prophet, as the leader, who is going to transmit Hashem's words to us directly from Hashem. And we believe that, and we have accept that primarily because Hashem himself, Kiviyachol, if that we can imagine Hashem talking and saying, this is who I am, and you have to trust Moshe from here on in. We have to accept the fact that Moshe, as we say in one of the 13 principles of faith of Rambam, is that we have to believe that Moshe's nevuah is true. And the reason we believe that is here Hashem himself says, that throughout eternity, we will believe that Moshe is a true prophet. because of what happened at Har Sinai. Moshe tells all these words to the people. Hashem gives them more instructions. Here he gives them in pasuk Yud. Again, this is all preparatory to Hashem appearing at Har Sinai. Hashem gives Moshe all of the commandments. They have to be prepared and set themselves aside to get ready for this awesome event. You can't just say, okay, let's wake up in Hashem, we're ready to listen to Hashem. We have to prepare ourselves for it. That is what we spend the next 2 days doing. They should be prepared for the third day, because on the third day, Hashem is going to come down and speak to all of the people on Har Sinai. Our job is we have to surround the mountain. And we have to be wary of approaching the mountain. We cannot approach the mountain. That is part and parcel of what we have to be wary of. The mountain, while Hashem is resting his presence on it, is a holy place. We are not allowed to approach. Neither, by the way, is Moshe. We'll see later on that Moshe, even though here he's up on the mountain talking to Hashem, by the time Hashem rests his presence on Har Sinai and gives the Aseret Dibrot, Moshe is with the people. He's not with Hashem up on the mountain. And then it continues that as long as Hashem, only when Hashem's presence leaves the mountain, and it will be signified by large shofar blowing, then the mountain will return to its normal non-sanctified status. But as long as Hashem's presence is resting on the mountain, it has the status of the Kodesh Kodashim. No one's allowed to go in there, period. Okay. Moshe comes down to the mountain and he gets the people prepared, and they go through the ritual of what they have to do for the next couple of days. And he says, be ready for the third day. And for 3 days, you have to separate from your wives so that you should be prepared spiritually, physically for this revelation. The third day, then we have the mountain, the whole revelation. Now Moshe brings the people out from the regular camp, and they're all camped at the bottom around the mountain. Mountain is Ashan Kulo, it's full of a cloud, because Hashem has now come down upon the mountain in fire. The whole mountain was trembling. There was a lot of shofar blowing. Moshe was speaking, Hashem would answer him. And then it says, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. Hashem comes down to the mountain, and he calls to Moshe, and Moshe comes up. Okay. Moshe. Now, Moshe goes up to the mountain when Hashem calls him, but then Hashem says to Moshe, Raid ha'ed ba'am, go down and tell the people, that they should not try to come up the mountain to see Hashem, because they will die, as we've said before. Not only the people, the Gama Kohanim, even the Kohanim, who at this point are the firstborn, who are the ones who will be performing the service up until Chet HaEgel. The firstborn were the ones who were the Kohanim that would officiate at the Karbanot. They also are not allowed to, they also have to set themselves aside and not allowed to approach Hashem at this point. Pen Yivros by Hashem. And Moshe says, right, we understand that. You already told us we can't go up the mountain. We have to surround the mountain and sanctify, set aside the mountain, because you Hashem, are resting on it, is sanctified. And then Hashem tells Moshe, now you have to go down and be with the people, but you and Aaron will come up part of the way. They cannot come up to Hashem, because there will be a plague if the people come up to the mountain. Vayered Moshe Elam. Now, when Moshe goes down and is among the people, then Vayomer Elam, and then Hashem first reveals the Aseret HaDibrot. Okay, so all of that is what happens in prior to, and clearly this parak here of Yitro clearly describes the chronology of the days leading up to the giving of the Torah. Now, the question you have to answer is, in Parshat Mishpatim, after Hashem gives a whole parsha, 6 aliyot worth of laws relating to all sorts of things, between man and man, there are laws of damages, there are laws of what happens if this happens or that happens, if somebody hurts somebody and they have medical expenses, all sorts of different categories of laws, also involving The holidays are listed, the Chagim are listed, coming up to the Beit HaMikdash 3 times a year. All of these laws are listed in Mishpatim, 41 different mitzvot in Mishpatim, according to most counts. And ultimately, the parshat Mishpatim enters now with a historical sequence of events that we're going to read about right now on this side. Mishpatim. After Hashem has given all these laws, it says, Moshe Amar, Hashem says to Moshe, Alei al Hashem, come up to Hashem, Atah v'Aaron, Nadav, Avihu, v'Shivim b'nei Yisrael. You and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, as I guess the next chain of command, and the 70 elders, they will bow to Hashem from a distance. V'nigash Moshe levado al Hashem. Then Moshe will approach Hashem himself. V'heim lo yigashu. However, Aaron, Nadav, Avihu, the 70 elders will not come any closer. In other words, even though they will approach closer than the rest of the people, they will not be allowed to approach all the way either. For Amlo Yalu Imo, the rest of the people have to stay in the camp. But these 70 elders, Aaron and other people, can come part way. Moshe is going to go further ultimately, but that's what Hashem tells Moshe. Now, we're going to see if there's a difference of opinion as to when this happened. Is this El Moshe Amar Alei al Hashem? Was this told to Moshe prior to Hashem's revelation at Har Sinai or after? We're going to see a difference of opinion between Rashi and Ramban as to whether this chapter at the end of Mishpatim really belongs in Parshat Yisro chronologically, or it's in its proper place here in Mishpatim. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, first I want to just read through the events that happen here, and then we'll get into the machloket between Rashi and Ramban in terms of the specific details of when this happened. Okay. Moshe comes and speaks to the people the words of Hashem and all the Mishpatim. Seems very, very similar to Pasuk Zayin that we had in Yitro. Again, all the Dvarim Ha'ela Shetzivo Hashem is very similar to the Divrei Hashem, but here it adds it's Kol Mishpatim. But again, what happens? The people will answer in one voice and they say, Kol Hashem Naseh. Whatever Hashem says, we will do. Very, very similar to Pasuk Chet that we had over here. So we could say, and Rashi is going to say, that these psukim are basically complementing the others. They're describing the same exact events from two slightly different perspectives, with basically the same perspective, and they happen at the same time. It's the same events being described. But we're going to add, our parsha is going to add things that don't appear in the other the description in Yitro, and according to Rashi, all of this happens that we're talking about now happens before Matan Torah. Moshe writes all of these Divrei Hashem. We just had it. First, he tells them the Divrei Hashem, and then here it says Moshe et Kol Divrei Hashem. Moshe writes these words down, presumably in some type of scroll. He gets up early in the morning. We don't know what morning this is. He builds an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars, one pillar for each of the 12 tribes. So he builds an altar, 12 pillars, and then he sends the young ones of Bnei Yisrael. Na'arei here is from Na'ar, the young ones. They offer karbanot. They offer karbanot. And they also offer shlamim. They offer two different types of karbanot, olot and shlamim. And these are all parim. These are all oxen are offered as different types of karbanot. By the way, Na'arei, most of the commentaries tell us that this Na'arei is, of course, the young Kohanim, but not Kohanim per se, the young firstborn, because as I said, up until the time of Chet HaEgel, it is the firstborn who are the Kohanim who are performing the avodah, the service here involved with Karbanot, Olot, and Shlamim. Now, Moshe does something very unique here. He takes exactly half of the blood. He puts them into containers, and half of the blood from all of these karbanot he takes and pours on the mizbeach. So the blood is going in two different directions, almost at this whole concept here. And then it says, he's going to take a book of the covenant. He's going to read it to the people. Here we have this magic phrase of Naaseh v'nishma. All the people all said, Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. And we have to describe first what's the difference between Nasa and Nasa v'nishma. Then we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to talk about the fact that he takes this blood and splits it half, 50-50. Half of it is going on the Mizbeach. Half of it, we'll see in the next pasuk. He takes half it and pours it on the people. And he says, "This is the dam of the Brit that Hashem has created with you for all of these dvarim that we just read to you. I just read you this Sefer Brit with all the words of Hashem. And now we are going through this Brit ceremony, a covenant, very, very similar to Avram Avinu with Brit Ben Abitarim, where he takes the two halves of the animal and passes between them. Here, the animals are represented not by the animals, but by the blood, where half is poured on the Mizbeach, half is sprinkled on the people. And through this, they're entering into this Brit through the Brit of Dam. In other words, just like and again, the symbolism of the Brit is just like the animals are part of the whole part of a single whole. The blood is part of a single whole. So too are we and Hashem part of a single unit. We are entering into a covenant to be Hashem's people, to be an extension, to be a whole of Hashem in teaching the world about Hashem. Okay. Again, let's talk about the concept of Naseh v'nishma. Naseh means that we will do things. Whether we understand why we're doing them, what we're doing is irrelevant. Naseh, we will do them. Here in this second half with the Sefer Brit, after Moshe has now read the words to them, he's written them down, he's read the words to them, after having spoken them out, he is now, again, as I said, he spoke, he told them everything before, but then he wrote it down, and then he takes Sefer Brit and reads it to them. So he says all of these things, and they say all of these Naseh v'nishma. So there's an added commandment or an added acceptance here. Nishma, we will hear, but we will understand. Now, we can't possibly humanly understand the reason for all of the mitzvot, but we are going to try to understand why Hashem has commanded us what he has commanded us, and that is the whole concept of Naaseh v'nishma. And as Mark the Midrash says, that by saying Naaseh v'nishma over and above Naaseh, Hashem said, wow, this is wonderful. I'm glad you've accepted this. And as a matter of fact, he says, Migila Sodi, who let out the secret of Nishma, that we will try our best to achieve a level of understanding of Hashem's Torah. That's what happens here at Har Sinai. Okay, again, the question we're going to see is, did this happen before or after they heard Hashem speak to them, that they said Naaseh v'nishma? Before that, we know they said Naaseh. We know that. The question is this one with the Brit, Naaseh v'nishma, where after accepting this covenant and taking the blood and having it spilled on them, they say Naaseh v'nishma. Is that before or after Hashem's revelation? Good question. Vayal Moshe, now, again, Moshe and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, 70 elders go up like Hashem commanded them. They see, okay, so they see Hashem from a distance, and they see that what he looks like, that the underneath the throne of Hashem looks like this magnificent, wonderful sight. I can't describe it because I have no idea what it's talking about. I can tell you the translation, but it says it looks like, a beautiful sapphire stone, but and pure sky. What does that mean? I don't know. It means they saw, again, they were able to see Hashem. Somehow they had some level of vision about God, and it was awesome. Okay. They saw Hashem by too, and they ate and drank afterwards. And again, different opinions among the commentators. What does it mean they ate and drank? One opinion says that they enjoyed the vision they had of Hashem was as satisfying as eating and drinking. That's one opinion. Other opinions are go in different directions. I'm not going to get into that. But notice now, and I specifically left this here, that there's a Sama. There's a new paragraph in the Torah. Pasuk Yud Bet here begins a new paragraph in the Torah. After we described the Brit, the covenant, the blood, Moshe reading the whole Sefer Brit, writing it all down, reading it to them. All of that is one chapter. And then there's another chapter here, which begins as follows. Now Moshe tells Moshe, come up to the mountain and you have to be there. Now, once you get up there, I am going to give you the tablets of stone and the Torah and the mitzvah that I have written to teach them, for you to teach the Jewish people. Okay? Moshe gets up, and Yoshua, his attendant comes with him. Vayal Moshe Har Elokim, he goes up to the mountain. But nobody goes with him except Yoshua. Remember, before it talked about Moshe going up with Nadav and Avihu and Aaron and the 70 elders. Here it's only Moshe and Yoshua, the only ones who go up. Yoshua goes up as his attendant. Moshe goes up basically alone, as we're going to see later on. That obviously he goes up alone, and Yoshua stays at a certain point. And we know that Yoshua stayed at a different point than everybody else. He was totally beyond the realm of the camp, because Yoshua later on, when Moshe comes down 40 days later, Yoshua has no idea what's going on. He hears these voices about, he has no idea that there's a golden calf happening, because he has been on the other side of the mountain waiting for Moshe to come down while everybody else was in the camp. As it came to the elders said, stay here. Aaron and Hur. Now notice here, it's not Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu. It's Aaron and Hur are given the leaders. Remember, the only time we've ever seen Hur before is when he was the one with Aaron who was holding up Moshe's hands in the war against Amalek. So again, Hur seems to be Aaron's assistant in this thing, in this leadership role, but Aaron is given temporary command. Aaron and Hur are given temporary command in Moshe's absence. Whoever has any questions, come to them in my absence. Then Vayal Moshe Har, Moshe goes up to the mountain, and the cloud covers it. Hashem's presence rests on Har Sinai. For 6 days, there is a cloud covering the mountain. Hashem calls Moshe on the 7th day, from amidst the cloud. The glory of God is like a fire burning at the top of the mountain in front of the eyes of all of Am Yisrael. All see that Hashem's presence is resting on Har Sinai. Now Moshe is now given permission by God to come into the cloud and ascend the mountain. And Moshe is on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, and that's the end of parshat Mishpatim. So we have to try to understand these two different chapters. When did they happen? Now, I'm going to first, let's count. By the way, telling you that Rashi says chapter 1 happens before Matan Torah, and it is complementary to what we read about in Yitro, and that's why the Gemara says that Nasav and Ishma was before Hashem revealed themselves. Ramban is going to say the exact opposite, that both of these chapters both happen after the giving of the Torah, and they are in chronological order. That the giving of the Torah, Hashem gives all of Am Yisrael the Aseret HaDibrot, and then the chapter after the Aseret HaDibrot, which talks about not making idols, and all of Parshat Mishpatim is taught to Moshe at that time, and then Moshe goes through this whole ceremony with Moshe, spends that afternoon, the rest of the day of the giving of the Torah, writing it down and teaching it to the Jewish people. And then by Ashkem Baboker that we read about here, that he gets up early the next morning, is the morning after Matan Torah. So we all have this vision of God giving us the Torah, and then Moshe immediately goes up. According to most commentators, that's not the way it happened. Moshe doesn't go up the mountain until the next morning. Ashkem Baboker is right. He gets up the next morning, according to Ramban, and this whole ceremony with the altar, bringing building the altar, setting up the 12 pillars for the 12 tribes, having these offerings brought, splitting the blood, reading the Sefer HaBrit, reading the book to all of the people saying Nasav and Ishma. All of this happens after the revelation on the next morning. And then Moshe in the afternoon goes up to Har Sinai and stays there for 40 days. Okay, let's read that, a little bit of that in Rashi. Let's go through Rashi and Ramban inside and go through their different commentaries. So we start with Rashi's commentary. Again, when Hashem tells Moshe at the beginning that we read, go up the mountain, he's saying that Parsha Zu, in other words, the first half of this, Nemer Kodem Aseret HaDibrot, Rashi says. This happened before the giving. It's all complementary to what we read in Yitro. The first half of this section is all happening before the revelation. Ubi Arba b'Sivan Nemer Lo Aleh. And it's specifically on the 4th day of Sivan, Hashem tells him to come up the mountain. And therefore, Rashi, now again, it says that Moshe writes, remember, it says, firstly, it says he speaks to Moshe and tells him all the words of Hashem and all of the Mishpatim. So the question we're going to have to focus on is, what are these words of Hashem and what are these Mishpatim? Now, according to Rashi, and by the way, those are the same words that Moshe writes and reads to the people the next morning, whatever the next morning is. Okay. Now Rashi's opinion that this happened all before has to say that all the words of Hashem are the mitzvah of Prisha v'Hagbalah, the commandment to separate themselves from their wives and to surround the mountain. Yet Kol Mishpatim, when the verse says all the Mishpatim, that's the Sheva mitzvot shenitztavu b'nei Noach. Here are the 7 universal commandments of Noach, are the laws that Moshe is teaching the Jews. But in addition to that, there's Shevat, Kibud Ava'im, Uparaduma, V'dinim, 4 different halachot that were already taught to them at Marah. When they stopped and the waters were bitter, it says in the verse there, Sham Sam Lo Choku Mishpat, there Hashem taught Moshe to teach Am Yisrael a few of the laws of the Torah already were given them before Matan Torah, before the revelation of Har Sinai. They had already received some mitzvot, and according to the Parshanim, according to the Gemara there, Parshanim there, those mitzvot that they were given at Marah were Shabbat, Kibud Ava'im, the mitzvah of Paraduma, and Dinim. All of these are learned out from different sukkim in different ways. These 4 specific mitzvot are learned out. And that's what Moshe taught the people and read to the people, because this is all before the Aseret HaDibrot. And therefore, when it says Vayichtov Moshe, when he writes these words, what was he writing down? Rashi says, Mi Bereshit ad Matan Torah. He was writing down all of the Torah from Bereshit through Matan Torah. So all of the stories of creation, Noah, the stories of the Avot, all was what Moshe wrote down, and the mitzvot that they were commanded at Marah. That's what Moshe was writing down in this book that he read to Am Yisrael before the giving of the Torah. Okay, then Vayash came Baboka, so when Moshe gets up in the morning to build this altar and do this whole ceremony with the dam, that's already on Chamish Shabbos Sivan. It is the day preceding the giving of the Torah. It is not in chronological order. This is all, as I said, complementary to what happened in Parshat Yitro. And on the 5th of Sivan was when they did this whole ceremony with the reading of the Torah. They said Nasa v'nishma, and Moshe pours the dam on Mizbeach, half on Mizbeach and half on the people. Sefer HaBrit. What was the Sefer HaBrit that he read? We just said. What did he write? Mi Bereshit ad Matan Torah, mitzvot shenitztavu Marah. Again, from the story from Bereshit through Matan Torah and the mitzvot that they were commanded in Marah. Okay. All of that, according to Rashi, that first half of that last chapter, Mishpatim, is out of chronological order. Now, when he gets to Pasuk Yudbet, when Rashi gets to the second half of the chapter, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, when Hashem tells Moshe to come up to the mountain and I'll give you the luchot and teach you the Torah, that's already le'achar Matan Torah. So now Rashi says that, well, I have to admit the second half of this chapter has to be after Matan Torah, because it's going to end with the word that Moshe goes up to the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And we know that doesn't happen until after the giving after the revelation. So what does he have to be there? For 40 days, Abraham Yom, Rashi says. By the way, the number 40 is not an arbitrary number. It is a very unique and specific number. We know that the number 40 we see as 40 days. We see it often a number of times. We see it specifically with Noah, that the flood lasts for 40 days and 40 nights. We see it that with the spies, that it takes them 40 days to traverse Eretz Yisrael. The reason the Parshanim want to say that the significance of the number 40 is because proverbially, it's 40 days. The first 40 days is Yetzirat Havlad. Takes 40 days from conception till we recognize the fetus. 40 days of growth within of the embryo until it becomes a fetus. Or if I get the terminology right, an embryo becomes a fetus. Yeah. So 40 days, whenever we have a concept of 40 days or 40, it represents rebirth, a new beginning. So here, the fact that Moshe goes up to the mountain for 40 days is because Am Yisrael is beginning a new chapter, a new beginning. They're being reborn as Hashem's people, but not as Hashem's people, but the people of the Torah who've accepted this covenant. So this 40 is a very significant number that we always say, well, we know that Moshe goes up the mountain for 40 days, but there's a significance to the fact that Moshe goes up for 40 days. That 40 days is a very significant thing because it relates to recreation, rebirth. There are those that say that the reason the mikvah has to have 40 sa'ah of water, 40 specifically is the measure for a mikvah, because again, the same concept of recreation. Okay, lots of different concepts there. Okay, again, Rashi continuing. Now, what am I going to teach? What is Moshe going to get when he goes up the mountain at Luchot HaEvan? Obviously, the stone, the tablets of stone, which have the Aseret HaDibrot. But why does? But it also says VaTorah VaMitzvah shekatavti lahorotam, the Torah and the mitzvot that I have written to teach them. Now Rashi, because again, this is is saying that this is not what Moshe wrote down. Moshe wrote down from the beginning of the Torah through Matan Torah through from Bereshit only through Matan Torah, not the whole Torah. When Moshe came down from Har Sinai, he didn't have the whole Torah yet. Why? But on the other hand, Rashi wants to say that Kol Sheish Mitzvot B'Chlal Aseret HaDibrot, that when Hashem says about Torah of a mitzvah, that the luchot are going to contain, it's the only thing that Hashem is giving Moshe is the luchot. He's not giving him a Torah or a mitzvah. And Rashi says, why does it refer to Torah and mitzvah? Because all 613 mitzvot are included in the Aseret HaDibrot. And Rabbeinu Saja Gaon he gives a list of all 613, how they fit into one of the 10 categories. In other words, the Aseret HaDibrot are not just 10 mitzvot, they are the 10 categories of mitzvot. And Rav Saja Gaon goes through how every single mitzvah fits under one of those categories. Either accepting Hashem, not worshiping idols, honoring our parents, or every mitzvah fits into one of those categories. Okay, and then it says, now Rashi first brings down a difference of opinion, because it says that the cloud covered the mountain for 6 days, and Hashem called Moshe on the 7th day. So we have a difference of opinion. There's one opinion that says when it says the cloud covered the mountain for 6 days, that's referring to the 6 days preceding the revelation. That's the first opinion. The second opinion, by the way, which Rashi brings down later on in a minute, okay, and now he calls Moshe on the 7th day, Lomar Aseret HaDibrot, to teach him the Aseret HaDibrot. Moshe v'chol b'nei Yisrael only. Moshe and all of the were standing around the mountain on this 7th day. Why does it say Vayikra Moshe? Why is it specifically Hashem called to Moshe on the 7th day? To give Moshe honor, to say that Hashem called him as the leader of Bnei Yisrael, to tell Bnei Yisrael all to come out that it was time for the Aseret HaDibrot. That's what it means that he called Moshe on the 7th day. And then after the revelation, Moshe goes up to the mountain. Okay, when the verse says, even though this chapter is already after Matan Torah, the fact that the cloud covered it for 6 days was already a flashback that had already been covered for 6 days. That's the first opinion. The other opinion says no. The Yesh Omer, the second opinion, is that the fact that these 6 days are the first 6 of the 40 days. These 6 days, where it says that the Anan, the glory of God, covered the mountain for 6 days of the 40, these are the first 6 days of the 40. Why are they set aside from the whole 40? Why are these 6 days any different than the 40? Rashi wants to tell you this. This comes to teach us before you can enter into God's precinct, if you will, you have to be set aside for 6 days. This becomes one of the bases for the fact that before the Kohen Gadol, every year, before he would enter the Kodesh Kodashim on Yom Kippur, he was set aside for an entire week prior from his family. He lived in the Beit HaMikdash for that week. And during that week, he was busily involved in preparing himself for Yom Kippur, where he was going to have to enter the Kodesh Kodashim, God's sanctuary, if you will. So this verse here is the same parallel that Moshe, before he could enter God's precinct, he had to separate himself for 6 days, and then he could go to Hashem. However, according to this opinion, they're part of the 40 days. The 40 days are not 46 days, according to every opinion. There's 40 days that Moshe is on the mountain. According to this opinion, the reason it specifically mentions these 6 days is to remind us that Moshe separated himself for these 6 days to prepare himself to enter God's camp, if you will. Okay, that is all Rashi's opinion. Rashi, as I said, that the first half of this chapter is out of chronological order. It's complementary to Yitro, and it happens before the revelation. The second half happens after the revelation, where Moshe goes up to Hashem and is there for 40 days and tells the elders, you have to stay behind, and only Yoshua accompanies him. That's already after the revelation. Now we're going to go to Ramban's opinion, which is the exact opposite. First, he quotes Rashi's opinion, Parshas Unemakod Aseret Dibrot, and then he says the following: Veina Parshiot Bod Kesidron Lo K'Mishpon Kalal. The parshas here are not in order, and according to Rashi, and therefore this doesn't make sense to Ramban. The Od Ketiv, okay? Here's why. Here's the first reason why. Remember that at the beginning, when Moshe comes, this chapter describes Moshe speaking to Hashem, speaking to the people. He says he speaks to the people all the words of Hashem, but all the Mishpatim. Now, where do we have the word Mishpatim? Beginning of this chapter, beginning of this parsha, we have Vishema Mishpatim Ha'ela. V'ela Mishpatim Asher Tasim Lefneim is the pasuk that we had at the beginning of the parsha. So here, when it says that Moshe speaks to the people, all the Mishpatim, Ramban wants to say, that's we've had a call HaMishpatim. It doesn't say called Mishpatim, all laws. It says HaMishpatim, the laws. What are the laws? Where else do we have the word HaMishpatim? Right here at the beginning of our parsha, Hey HaMishpatim Ha'ela. As it says, and then we are specifically told that Hashem tells Moshe, these are the Mishpatim you should put before them. So it seems very strange, Rashi's opinion, where it says that Moshe tells the people all on Mishpatim, that's before Hashem even gives them the Mishpatim. That doesn't seem to make sense, especially given the fact that from a perspective of the way it's written in the Torah, it seems to flow very nicely. Moshe comes now and tells the people all these mishpatim. Rashi was forced to say that when Hashem says the mishpatim, it's talking about the mitzvot b'nei Noach and the mitzvot that they were given in Marah. They already knew all of those mitzvot. Moshe didn't have to repeat those to the people before at this point. Because it says he tells them. It doesn't say he repeats to them and reviews with them. The word vayisaper seems to imply that Moshe was teaching them something new, not laws they had already learned at Marah, not the 7 mitzvot that they already knew, but new laws. And that's why Raman says that this parsha, the beginning here of the whole parsha of the Brit, of reading the Sefer Brit, of the blood, of the karbanot, of the building of the altar, all of that happened not before the revelation, after the revelation. The whole concept of Naaseh v'Nishma is after the revelation, not before. Yes, it's part of the revelation chapter because it's before Moshe goes up for the 40 days and 40 nights, clearly, but nonetheless, it is happening after the giving of the Torah, that they enter into the spirit. So they have already heard Hashem. They already have an idea of what they're accepting, because Moshe has now taught them this whole parsha of Mishpatim, according to Ramban. When it says that he reads the Sefer Brit, the Sefer Brit includes all of these Mishpatim, this whole chapter of Mishpatim, lots of detailed laws. So they're already accepting that. They know that they're accepting that. And they're still willing to not only accept it, but there's Nishma, we're going to hear them, we're going to review them, we're going to try to understand them the best we can, and clearly there's a lot more of an acceptance here than just blindly following what Hashem tells us to do. We have to try to understand why and what that is supposed to do to us. What is it supposed to shape us into? The words of Torah are supposed to permeate our existence, this nishma. Something permeates, that you hear it, you understand it, you feel it, it becomes part and parcel of who you are. Our approach, our relationship with mitzvot, with Torah, should be something that permeates our entire existence, to the extent that we want to try to live our lives according to those principles and not go out of those boundaries, not because we're forced to, but it's a burden that Hashem has put upon us. It's a privilege and an honor that Hashem has given us this role that we want to fulfill. Okay, Raman goes further for Haiti, Avram, he quotes Ibn Ezra, who also says that this is in order. Ki ad hena Sefer Brit. This is the Sefer Brit. Again, we have this concept of Sefer Brit, that Moshe writes something down as the Brit, and clearly According to Ramban, it includes this whole chapter of Mishpatim. It doesn't include the whole Torah yet, because clearly the whole Torah is not ready. We don't have it yet because it hasn't, quote, happened yet. So, but nonetheless, at this time, the Mishpatim are clearly part and parcel of it. And the proof seems to be, again, this whole parsha is in order. In other words, Hashem reveals himself at Har Sinai, gives us the Aseret HaDibrot. Then, Acharei Matan Torah miyad bo bayom, immediately on the same day as Matan Torah, because Matan Torah, Hashem's revelation of the Aseret HaDibrot to Am Yisrael, happens early in the morning. It doesn't take Hashem all day to give us Aseret HaDibrot. There's a whole day still to come. Bo bayom, Hashem tells Moshe, Kol tomorrow b'nei Yisrael Hashem ritemi kimina shamayim dibarti nochem. The last few verses in Parshat Yitro are given to Moshe right after Matan Torah on that same day. And then he teaches, and by the way, they begin, the first mitzvah there is since you, Am Yisrael, have seen that I spoke to you from the Shemayim, you should not make any representation of me. I am not physical. Don't try to reduce me to something physical by making gold and silver gods. And then he commands Moshe, these are the Mishpatim, these are the laws that you have to put in. He gives it this whole parsha, all the mitzvot that come after it. And again, how does that section end? If you go to Parshat Mishpatim and you look right before the last Aliyah, again, it reminds us about Avodah Zarah, that we have to be wary. When we come into Eretz Yisrael, we have to be very wary, because the nations there all have their own gods, their own idolatry that they worship. You have to eradicate it, wipe it out, so that you will not be drawn after it. And then now after you have given them all these commandments, you and Aaron come up with the 70 elders, and you'll see Hashem. And they see Hashem, and then they all go down, and then Moshe again comes up alone with Yoshua. Moshe did exactly what Hashem commanded him to do. He came to the camp. He told the people all the words of Hashem as Hashem had commanded him, and all the Mishpatim that Hashem commanded him. He writes them down. They all accepted it and said, Na'aseh. Why did they accept it? We believe you, Moshe, now. We know all these words that you've told us, Egypt, we now believe fully. Not that we didn't believe him before, but we now fully believe that everything you tell us is the words of Hashem. And they themselves, after Matan Torah, say, now that we've heard Hashem, Moshe, now we've heard from God. This was such an awesome experience. We can't do it every day. We can't do it on a regular basis. We've done it once. We have heard Hashem. We have reached this spiritual high. We can't stay on that spiritual high. We know it, and therefore we are giving you, Moshe. We accept you as our messenger to learn everything from Hashem and teach it to us. And then Moshe writes these words down, and that's exactly what happened. The same day that Hashem revealed himself, Moshe writes it all down. Chukim, Mishpatim, Torah. And then Mishkim Baboker, he gets up the next morning, Mimachrat Hayom, the day after the day they received the Torah. He has the Brit, he builds the Mizbeach, he brings the offerings, he puts half the blood, he takes the Sefer Brit that he wrote yesterday and reads it against them. Even though they've heard it all orally yesterday, today, this following day, he reads it to them from this Sefer that he's now written down. And they said, now, Na'aseh v'nishma. Okay, now here he's translating Na'aseh, that we will do v'nishma elecha, we will listen to you as the representative of God, which is one interpretation of Na'aseh v'nishma. That the nishma is added, that they're accepting Moshe as their messenger to teach them the words of God. And then Moshe sprinkles, after they say Na'aseh v'nishma, then Moshe sprinkles the other half of the blood on the people. Kizot ot habrit lavo hashnayim b'chalakim shavim, as we had with Brit Ben Abitarim, that because now half of the blood went to Hashem and half went to the people, it is joined them in this Brit. Now, after he fulfilled the words that Hashem commanded about the people, now he fulfilled the words of Hashem that he told him, Alei Atavi Aaron and the chief Nadav and Avihu and the 70 elders, and they went up. And then finally, Moshe fulfills the commandment, Yigash levado el Hashem, he should approach Hashem alone. Okay, so all of this all happened. All of this happened on the day after the giving of the Torah, and that's when Moshe goes up for 40 days and 40 nights. Okay. So having said all this, we have to understand what's the point of all of this? What is it all to teach us? And I think we go back to the beginning where I started. The fact is that the revelation at Har Sinai is a unique event. It shapes us who we are as a people, and it gives us our role, our unique role as Hashem's messengers to the world. We are to be a mamlechet kohanim b'goy kadosh. We are to be, as we colloquially say, an or lagoyim. Our job is to live our lives in such a way that people look at us and say, that's what being godly is about. And that is the mission that the Jewish people accepted with this concept of Na'aseh v'nishma, that it's not enough to just go through the motions and do the mitzvot. Yes, that's important, but we have to do it with a feeling, with an emotion, with an attachment to it, with a love for doing the mitzvot, for learning the Torah, with a love of God that is so evident that people will want to learn more about God, come closer to God. When we're able to fulfill that mission, that's when we will be zocheh to Gula Shleim Meher Yameinu. Thank you very much. And